Trump's trade war is aimed at reshoring, but will it work? Producer price data shows surging trucking and transportation rates. Can you solve the driver problem by making trucking cool again? A new frac sand giant is born amid an industry shift, and the CEO of Shell wants a swifter ban on diesel and petrol cars in the UK. I'm JP.
And I'm Chad.
And we discuss all this and more on this week's episode of What the Truck.
Yeah, so exciting to be here with you on episode 19, JP. Here on what, July 12th, 13th?
I would say it's a big deal.
It feels like it's Friday the 13th, and I'm kind of nervous about what's happening.
Really?
Yeah, I'm superstitious.
Triskaidekaphobia? The fear of the number 13? Did you know what that was?
Apparently I do.
You seem terrified.
I am. So, what are you drinking there, bro?
Well, I'll give you a hint. It's
Why
orange,
do I ask?
it's green, and there's a picture of a nice big trout on the can. It's Bell's Two Hearted, people. Ooh, what you got there, Chad?
Well, I've got a highlight.
High Alai, not a High Life. The champagne of beers.
Oh no, not the High Life. Although
But
I will,
not the champagne of beers, more of the lacrosse racquetball hybrid of beers.
Yeah, I have to say that this is a beautiful, gorgeous, caramely. It claims that it by Cigar City Brewing. It claims that it's
What is Cigar City?
They are a cool brewing company out of Tampa, Florida.
Interesting.
Yes,
Cigar
and this strangely enough, yeah, I guess it's the Cuban connection.
Right. So I would think Havana,
But it's a strange name. Like, why High Alai? That they call it a merry game. It doesn't seem like a merry game at all. It's where they throw those balls out of the things that they're throwing them out of as fast as they can.
I would call that a terrifying game.
Not merry.
A merry game to me is, Rip Van Winkle bowling 9 pins on the village green.
Ooh, that does sound merry.
That's
what
merry.
else is merry? Maybe a little cornhole. That can be merry.
That could be merry.
Until you get a little competitive with it. But High Alai as a beverage, it's got, it compares favorably in its malt grain bill with the Bell's Two Hearted, I would say. But guess what? Rather than, as opposed to last week's Promenade with 4 hops, guess how many hops? I win the hops war.
I'm going to say 6.
6 is correct. That's because I already told you. I don't know which 6 they are. But, boy, I mean, it's surprising that they don't call this a NEPA.
Really?
But, a New England IPA. But being from Tampa,
a New England
PA. Maybe they, let's get a little more in there.
Maybe they just have a thing against the Yankees.
Yeah, maybe they're just like this.
Like, look, we're making a nice, hazy, unfiltered, double, whatever hopped NEPA, but we're not going to call
it's
it
nice. One of my favorite things to do is talk headlines of the week in trucking transportation while having a gorgeous beer.
Samesies.
So what's up? So one of the fun, crazy, insane headlines of the week is...
Well, yeah, we all know it's the
Trumpian
tariffs, yes.
Yeah, it certainly gives us a lot to talk about.
Right, it's hundreds of billions of dollars of extra costs on the American consumer.
Whoa, you're just cutting right to the chase, aren't you?
Well, it's a little bewildering to me. It's a little disconcerting.
One of the things that's funny about all the things that are going on with the tariffs, it feels like the tariffs are beginning to feel less like possible strategic targets and more like an indiscriminate bombing campaign.
Yeah. Have you ever went to buy a new iPhone and said, this should cost about 25% more?
I have not. In fact, the opposite.
Then you probably are not in favor of these tariffs.
So you're saying none of us should be? Well, the latest consumer products to be targeted include everything from tuna and salmon, and other fish to luggage tires, dog leashes, handbags, toys, baseball gloves, furniture, apparel, mattresses, electric lamps, and television cameras. Is there anything that it doesn't touch on? Pretty much the aim could be anything imported from China.
Yeah, and Trump actually said that he is considered, the goal is essentially to target every dollar of Chinese imports that we bring into this country, which is, a big chunk of our, consumer economy.
This is what I think, JP. I think that our audience probably has heard a lot about this anyway. There's an interesting analogy that you talked to me about, why
to me,
are tariffs frustrating to you?
To me,
what's the analogy?
To me, they don't work because we saw this on the initial sort of play that Trump made with the trade war stuff when he put the tariffs on steel and aluminum. Okay, right?
Yeah, the beginning.
Supposedly to encourage renewed employment among our nation's depressed Rust Belt, post-industrial centers, right? But U.S. Steel, stock exploded on that news. It went right up, and it wasn't because they said they were going to hire a bunch more people and produce a lot more steel,
right?
It was because, oh wait, you're putting a 20% tariff on imported steel. We can raise our prices 20% and get a bunch of free money.
Yeah,
so, it's all just inflation. So, and the analogy that I used is that putting tariffs on a foreign trade partner is like trying to squeeze a water balloon and make it smaller.
I like that analogy.
It doesn't actually get smaller; it just gets bigger somewhere else. So,
a water balloon.
If we start taxing stuff coming out of China, it's not going to come back to the U.S. It's going to go to Vietnam, Korea, Hong Kong, Cambodia, India.
Who's next to fill in with
cheap
taking
labor,
on the cheap labor,
cheap raw materials,
reshoring all of these things back to American soil.
This was your point in the piece that you wrote about this, was that the dream is to, then this baffles me, but the idea that we're going to bring an iPhone factory to the U.S. and people will actually want to work in that,
right? To rebalance
instead
the
of offshore
export ratio.
Instead of offshoring and outsourcing, we are reshoring and insourcing.
Yeah,
but has that actually played out?
No, it has not so
yet.
far. No, it's not. We write about it in the article, such as the analysts and experts projected out and look at it so far, but I feel like that must be the end game. And it's similarly and related is our next headline: producer price data showing surging trucking and transportation rates. What's the takeaway to you about this piece from Ibrahim?
Yeah, so this is by Ibrahim Bayan, our chief economist. And he's talking about the producer price index, right? Which is, when we
PPI.
When we talk about inflation, most people focus on the CPI.
Yes.
The consumer price index, which is like, okay, a gallon of milk costs this much compared to what it used to. A gallon of gas costs this much, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's about price. It's about trying to get at inflation based on prices paid by consumers. The PPI looks at the other side of the economy,
end of the continuum,
which is the prices paid by manufacturers. So how much does electricity cost? How much does water cost
to produce?
How much does like
as it's coming into us
to a factory? Yeah. Like a factory's consuming electricity, a factory's consuming water, a factory needs, industrial real estate, a factory and manufacturers also need transportation. And that the rapid inflation in transportation costs since
We're seeing
since
huge
middle
inflation.
of 2017. As we know, it's
I don't mean
affected.
to. Yeah, go ahead.
It's
I'm
affected
sorry.
manufacturers. It's affected shippers. It's kind of interesting because there's an interplay. Once the PPI starts going up high enough, you're going to start seeing it in the CPI, right?
Sure, and that is, I think, part of the yin and yang of it all. Like we're seeing. I think one of the huge takeaways of the story is that the PPI inflation has hit a 6.5-year high this June.
Right. The
And
rate of inflation is like what, like over 3%?
yes, as according to the charts of the year-over-year growth, and they're also one of the things that we're dealing with is that that we've talked about it and we've talked about it and we've talked about it. The capacity crunch of 2018 is spilling into other modes of freight transportation now.
Definitely.
So fascinating stuff, somewhat disturbing stuff, but
Because it's almost like the tariffs, like the way that oh, so you raised, I'm an American producer of aluminum cans. You raised tariffs on imported aluminum cans, so I get to raise my prices too.
Yeah.
Railroads have the same kind of relationship with trucking.
Right.
Basically, if there's crazy trucking rates happening, they're like, oh, well, we get to raise our rates because
and we get some spillover, and then we get to raise our rates. Right. It's stuff you're hearing it here. Like, how much more can our growing economy absorb? It's growing, it's exciting, starting to hit some real issues, which I feel like, and I said I feel again, I think that what I'm seeing is signals of inflation unless
sure.
something is
For sure.
given. Like we the consumer are going to start feeling this. And like while we keep talking about all these capacity issues, we've constantly talked about because it's a major issue, the driver problem in trucking, however one wants to define it. And,
right. And yeah, it's directly linked to the PPI, right? And the rising cost of transportation for manufacturers. It's directly related to the driver shortage problem.
And maybe it seems like a weak question in some ways to ask, but like, can you like in a great economy where employment is as low historically as it's about ever been in the United States, can you help make a dent? Can you move the needle in the trucking problem, the driver problem, by in some way appealing to the younger generation and making trucking in a different way cool again? And I guess what I like, so it's not just it's not just an obvious, like back in the days before things were deregulated,
Right.
like truckers literally were considered cool. Right? It was cool to be a trucker. There was a romantic ideal. You were the king of the road. You were a trucker cowboy. Now, slowly but surely, incrementally, as things have become, much more techy and regulated.
Exactly. We're almost in an era of re-regulation.
Ooh, I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we were deregulated, right? And it was still
and it's important to say that, of course, compared to pre-1980, we're still deregulated. Like, you don't need permission from the government to to haul freight in a certain lane like you used to.
Right.
It's completely it's different from that.
But it is so measured.
But now the government literally knows every single thing you do in your truck.
You're braking when you take a left-hand turn. Right. It's not the same animal.
Right.
And so how to the millennial generation, but maybe even younger than that. We've given a lot of, because millennials, are 30 somethings. Well, what about the early 20s somethings? Like, how can we appeal well, however we define exactly these constituencies or socio-demographic populations, how can we appeal and make trucking cool in a techie kind of way? And this article that we wrote was exploring this.
Yeah.
And we talked to CDL Marketing, and one of the things they work on are digital strategies to encompass every aspect of online recruiting.
Right.
And they constantly are looking at how can we make trucking cool, and helping carriers of all sizes and private everywhere. They're looking at like how can we do that, and the COO, Ben Ani, who was actually on for our 5 Good Minutes last week, he said, I talked to him this week, and he said, for our parents' generation, it was all about how cars were cool, and there were muscle cars and all that. He was like, nobody in our generation cares about that anymore. In the past, trucks were really cool. What are you driving? What's your equipment? That is not it.
I kind of think, though, that's being a little undersold. Like, the more I learn about like the physical truck itself,
they're cool,
the more I think it's an incredible machine. Like these trucks
completely
are hauling tens of thousands of pounds all day, every day, over 100,000 miles a year.
Yeah.
They way outclass any.
It's like
dinky consumer vehicle
totally
you can buy. Like,
I remember thinking how cool it would have been to be just like to have a little van when I was like in like college, like just like I could have a van. How cool that would have been. I could sleep in it. I could like travel the country, and that would be awesome.
In a van down by the river. But no,
but they could do a lot more than that.
Like I think it's just if you can understand how to operate your truck like professionally, if you look at all of the dials and the gauges and you see what's going on with the engine and the oil and the transmission and the RPMs and the load on the engine, I think like if you can tell people like you actually have the opportunity to operate an expensive, highly engineered machine and do a critical job, like,
and that is maybe how we can make things cool again.
And you pay them enough to do that.
Pay them enough. That's a different issue.
You treat them like a professional.
Well, right. Treat them like a professional. But the things that like part of the like instead of like shying away from the freedom, the independent, let's embrace the technology. Let's embrace the high-tech aspect of it. You're on the road. Let's make it as comfortable as possible. And like, have streaming services, have cool ways of playing video games. From that branding creative side, look at the day in the life. Think of it as a career.
Right.
Like those kinds of things are missing from a lot of, especially apparently according to Craig Jablonski and Ben Ani, is like what's missing is like they're not really telling them like of the carriers that are in the 100 to 500 range of trucks, like the mid-sized, not the super huge, but not the small ones, but like the mid-sized, they could be doing more of branding.
I wonder about how many more like services they could offer their drivers to increase quality of life. Like I don't, I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly.
Totally agree with you.
I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly how this works, but like, why can't carriers arrange for parking for their drivers in advance?
That's a great suggestion.
Like, why don't they do that?
And actually, as a result of writing this story, I've learned about a few more carriers that actually do more. But one of the things is it's not necessarily in a carrier's best interest to come out and celebrate how they're killing it with letting with having like great driver retention, because if they let the world know about their secret sauce,
they get copied.
Then they can get copied.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. That's why it might be harder than meets the eye to find. Also, though, I wonder, and we're riffing here, but what about that guy you told me about? That guy who is a super techie dude, a driver who's super techie, keeps up with his stats,
Yeah,
makes it a game,
yeah.
promotes it on social media.
Yeah.
Like,
You're talking about.
It's a new generation.
Joel Morrow.
Okay.
On LinkedIn, he's a 4 million mile driver. He is obsessed with MPGs, and he he goes cross country all the time, hauling all different kinds of freight.
Super smart dude.
Over the mountains.
And super techy.
Obsessed with data. Loves just squeezing, the most efficiencies he can get out of his truck.
I would get into that. If I were a driver, I would get into
his
that.
consoles look like it's like the Millennium Falcon. It's like it's like he's Han Solo out there, running his freighter, dodging the Imperial Star Destroyers.
Now you are making trucking cool again.
Getting
right
11
now.
to 12 MPGs.
Which is harder than meets the eye, especially when you're going over mountains.
Shell had to build a truck out of carbon fiber to get 11 MPGs.
And did they? Well, that's another subject, and we're going to talk about Shell in a moment.
True.
I think this is great stuff. I think though we need to shift gears, as they say, and let's talk about the new frac sand giant being born amid an industry shift such as you covered.
Yeah, and I'll be quick with this, but basically,
it's really interesting though.
So
surprisingly, when you're talking about sand,
right, and so fracking, hydraulic fracturing of shale rock formations to get oil and gas requires a lot of sand and water and other kinds of proppant mixed in with that to basically hit the rock and make all the stuff fizz up out of it. And so frac sand, and we're talking a lot of frac sand. So last year, the demand by the fracking industry for sand, 63 million tons. That's projected to reach.
You're getting pretty granular now.
That's projected to reach 100 million tons this year.
Okay.
And so historically,
so it's trending
up,
as I understand.
It's trending up. Three things I want to talk about though.
Yes.
So the newest frac sand company, Covia Holdings, is also the newest. The newest is also the biggest. Market cap of about $2.2 billion in an industry where there's another one that's about 2 billion, another one that's about 1 billion, and a couple that are a bunch of that are around the kind of the 250 million.
What about
them? They emerged out of this merger last month, and it's interesting because the industry seems like it's consolidating, and getting these bigger and bigger players at a time when a lot of things are changing. So historically, the frac sand has been mined in places up north like Wisconsin and Illinois. The sand's been loaded onto rail, put down south, into Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, the major shale.
And we're all very familiar with the Permian Basin.
Right.
But this is beyond that.
But now production is shifting to locally sourced sand.
Ooh.
It's cheaper, and it allows for a different kind of well to be exploited. Certain kinds of geologic formations that require more intensive use of sand can now be profitable because the sand is being sourced locally, and they're getting out of the $30 to $60 a ton cost that it takes to transport it by rail. So that's kind of interesting. So the sources of sand are moving closer to the actual oil production sites.
Okay.
That's one thing. The other thing is that a lot of these mines are now coming online. And actually, we're talking like 11 mines coming online by the end of this year. We're talking about even an oversupply of sand. Even
oversupply of sand.
Even though
you heard it here first.
Even though the demand for frac sand has gone up a lot this year and last year, now there's so much that people are saying that this could crash the prices. So it's an interesting and a weird and possibly a risky time for, to build a giant, to build the biggest frac sand giant corporation ever at a time right when the prices might be hitting a bottom.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think in that case, it's interesting, and things are happening in that segment, in that space.
Yeah. So that's that. I mean, it's, and all this sand, of course, is being delivered to these rigs, by truck. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line for us is that it's going to be less demand for railroad capacity carrying the sand, more intensified demand for last mile truck delivery. One
of the most fascinating things I find about tracking logistics and stuff is the way that it's like the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone, or is like the way that bone, right bone. It's like that. To me, that's what's is like, how does sand connect to the fracking, connect to the oil, connect to the rail, connect to the trucking, the drivers.
It was like this brief boom time for rails, saying like, oh, we're moving all this sand that people desperately need for oil, and now Union Pacific is giving guidance that their sand volumes are going to go down.
Right.
What? And it's all connected.
It is. It really is. It's so crazy and fun. It's actually fun. Like if you took any one of them by themselves, maybe not that interesting. But you take it all together and you start to put together a little bit of the picture. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. And our last major headline is that we're trying to cover in this busy week of fantastic headlines. Is the interesting thing, and as our theme of the global and domestic economics connects to everything, is that the Shell CEO at a conference in the UK last week suggested a swifter ban on diesel cars in the UK. So the ban to be in like by 2040. No more. Fossil fuel cars.
So
and they're saying, you know what? Not only not in 2040, but let's make it sooner.
Yeah. They're like saying no, it's even faster, and we're like, wait, what? You're Shell. Like you guys,
right?
You guys were the ones.
That's kind of cool.
You guys were the ones who spent all the money supposedly proving that like a diesel truck could like be really efficient and do like
that was a fun project. Let's give them cred there, but let's not digress. This was right.
So why would they say that?
Why would they say that?
The answer is Shell is buying up electric charging infrastructure.
Whoa.
That's why. So they're trying to almost conceive of themselves as sort of some kind of omni-channel energy company. Hey, fossil fuel, like we're not just gas, we're not just oil, we're not just whatever, like we're not just about carbon.
Yeah, I like it. It's a cool story by Mariah.
Yeah.
By Mariah Baker. Check it out. And like they're laying down the gauntlet and like suggesting
very interesting.
That like in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, and who knows what's happening in the US, but like in an international way, saying, look, like let's go all electric by, and okay, 2040 seems like a long way away. It's not to say that your world is turned upside down. Like it's so that's to me that's really fascinating.
It's interesting. Well,
that's cool.
So Shell's one of Shell's biggest competitors in the British Isles is of course BP, right? British Petroleum.
Yeah.
And they recently acquired a company with 6,500 charging stations just in Britain.
Yeah, they're doing a great marketing campaign ever since the Gulf, oil spill.
You watch a BP commercial.
That just happened, right?
You watch a BP commercial today, and it's like some like oceanographer, like in the Arctic, like, and they're like, what? Wait, oil? What? No.
Right. What? No, we're green and yellow. Look at our branding. It's great.
And ice, and like nothing's melting.
No, not at all. No, all is well. La la la. I don't hear you. No, but anyway. Anyway,
good.
it is time for us to run down now because we're heading up. I'm going to quit talking. I'm just going to say, are you ready for Big Deal, Little Deal? What's the deal with you?
I'm ready.
Big Deal Pickle. Okay, and I am going to begin with you. And go. Hyperledger Fabric 1.2 private data collection. Make B2B collaboration easier. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal. Before this, you would have to have really labor-intensive active management of channels to secure private data. Now you don't.
Hylian acquires battery supplier, strikes strategic partnership with Toshiba. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal, especially if they can use their regenerative brake technology to make any truck a hybrid.
Freightstar opens door to more flatbed revenue with partial loads service offering. Big deal or little deal?
I think it's kind of a little deal because right now flatbeds are enjoying the highest rates they've seen in years, and they're leading every other mode. So, I mean, do they need extra revenue?
Intermodal is just one piece of what Deutsche Bank sees as an improving rail picture. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal. When we talk about spillover from truckload to rail, we're talking about intermodal, and yeah, it's happening. Ohio moves forward on autonomous, but public still needs assurance. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. It's all about public acceptance for autonomous adoption, and Ohio's an important state.
Is the fallout from the Dynamex decision a big deal or a little deal?
Little deal in the short term across the U.S. In California, it could have huge impact for anyone involved with the independent contractor model.
Used truck prices continue to be strong in May, but equipment supply remains tight. Big deal or little deal?
Little deal. OEM suppliers can't provide needed components fast enough, and there's a bottleneck.
Mack and Volvo develop technician training programs in conjunction with community colleges. Big deal or little deal?
Little deal. We're not facing a crisis in technicians, just a shortage, and we'll constantly be adapting to new technologies. And we nailed it!
Booyah!
Yeah! Good times. And happy to bring you another episode of
What the Truck.
And that'll do it for the big stories this week. As always, we go into more detail about each of the topics we've talked about today on our website, FreightWaves.com. We will continue to publish this podcast weekly, so be sure to subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you think of our new podcast.
And if you're interested in freight economics and finance, come to our MarketWaves conference at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center in Grapevine, Texas this November. Visit MarketWaves18.com to learn more about this event.
That'll do it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on What the Truck.